Thanks, Jeff. Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be here today, and I'm going to be sharing with you an introduction to blockchain technology. I'm guessing most of you here know what Bitcoin is that right? So blockchain technology is the technology that makes Bitcoin possible, but it's much, much bigger than just Bitcoin. So we're really going to be focused on that underlying technology and what it makes possible in this presentation. And we're not going to be talking about cryptocurrencies at all. I want to start out with sharing with you a key way that blockchain technology is being used not next year, but right now in a surprising place. So the World Food Program, which gives food to millions of refugees around the world, is responsible for feeding about 500,000 Syrian refugees in Jordan. And last year, the World Food Program started a pilot to use blockchain technology to be able to manage accounts for refugees faster and cheaper. And that pilot was so successful that the World Food Program's blockchain-based payment system is now supporting over 100,000 refugees right now, and it's aiming to be rolled out to the whole community of Syrian refugees in Jordan. And not only that, but they're looking at applications beyond the managing of accounts. So let's talk a bit more about how this works. This is a picture of a Syrian refugee in Jordan going into an aid depot, a store to go get aid, things like flour and coffee and sugar, oil, staples. And instead of carrying an ordinary identity card, a piece of paper that could be stolen or taken away, we have a system where a refugee can come in and have their iris scanned. And that pulls up their identity using the biometric marker. And once their identity is pulled up, the World Food Program blockchain program connects that identity to an account, kind of like a bank account, but an aid account, so that the proprietors at the store know how much aid this person is owed and can give it to them. And the World Food Program estimates that they're currently saving about $40,000 a month using this program, which is a lot given the thin margin businesses that is the distribution of food. And so part of why we're opening up with this story and this example is that here at Singularity University, we care a lot about new technologies and also how they can be used to build businesses that will help the bottom billion. And that's something we all want to be aware of as the demographics of our world change and as these new technologies can really transform what's possible. And so I've shared with you a story of how blockchain is being used, but I want to stress why we're talking about blockchain technology now. It's come up a bunch in several of the different speeches, and it's definitely hyped. I admit that. Probably overly hyped. But this is a pretty cool figure. Gartner Research projects that the business value that will be generated in our global economy from blockchain technology, and this is not from Bitcoin, not from cryptocurrencies, take those aside, but the business value of this new technology, Gartner Research predicts $3.1 trillion plus by 2030. So that's in just over a decade. That's tremendous opportunity. And right now, we're lucky if we're in the tens of billions of business value because this technology is brand new. So for those of you who here has had an intranet in their company, an internal internet to the company? A lot of hands I'm seeing. And how many people have switched over to the cloud, a cloud-based? I'm seeing some hands. How many people thought they would switch to the cloud 10 years ago, right? I'm seeing almost no hands. So when the cloud computing first came out, it was this crazy weird thing that people thought would never really be used. How could it be secure? What is this cloud, right? And one of the challenges with new computing and advances in computing is they're abstract. And so now we're going to dive into how blockchain technology works. And as we discuss how blockchain technology works, I want to do some level setting here. Because I think one of the challenges of this technology is it's so new. It's only been possible since 2009. And then being able to build applications on top of blockchain, that's been possible only since 2015. So this is brand new technology, and it's brand new, so it's hard to understand it fully. But I want to ask everyone a question. So who here has sent an email today? Okay, almost every hand. Bear with me, it's right after lunch. So how many of you who've sent an email today really understand the DNS system, the distributed networking system, that's the mathematics, that governs the ones and zeros, that are the information that make up your email as they travel on our distributed network system of the internet? That underlying mathematics, who understands that? Okay, I'm seeing and who understands that such that they want to explain it on the stage? Okay, now I'm not seeing any hands. Great. So the reason I stress this, and I think this is a great example and analogy, is because you can all send emails regardless of how much you understand that mathematics. You have a conceptual understanding of what an email can do. And that's what we're going for here with blockchain technology. We're going for a conceptual understanding. And I'm going to be around at the breaks. I'll be around today. I'm going to share my email with you. For those of you who are engineers and mathematicians in the room who want to go deeper, we'll do that. But the point of this exercise is to give us that conceptual understanding so that you can work with your IT teams on developing blockchain solutions when that makes sense for your businesses. So if you're going to walk away with one short explanation of what blockchain technology is and how it works, this is it. What blockchain technology lets us do is, for the first time, we can give a unique fingerprint or a unique signature to a digital object, right? So if you go back to that email, one of the challenges of our internet world today is the incredibly high rates of fraud and the incredibly high rates of cybercrime. Because when you copy the ones and zeros of an email, it's almost impossible to tell the difference between the original and the copy. And with blockchain technology, what we can do is we can start being able to tell the difference between an original and a copy, which means that if we have blockchain-based understanding or identity, for example, for money, then we can't give the same digital dollar to two people. How many people here ever send payments using some kind of internet banking system? Almost everybody. Yeah, everybody does. So when you send a payment using your online technology, it's not as if you're actually handing a euro to one person where you can see, okay, that euro is going here and not there, right? You can see it. But when we do online payments, we rely on Visa, we rely on our banks, to basically stop people from spending the same digital dollar in two places. And they make mistakes. So the rates of cybercrime and fraud when it comes to hacking bank accounts is very high. And it's expensive for banks and for the Visas of the world to start to make sure that the same digital dollar is not spent in two places. With blockchain technology, instead of relying on a centralized authority, we start relying on a network system that gives that unique identity to the digital object to tell the difference, so that we can't copy our digital dollars and put them into two places. And so let's get into this a bit more of how this works. So for those of you in the room who are familiar with Excel, how many people have used Excel or some kind of PowerPoint software? Okay, everybody. I'm checking in because one of the challenges with blockchain is we've got people at all ends of the spectrum of knowledge, and so it's great to make sure we're all coming along the train together. So with Excel, I actually I have a JD MBA, so I did business school. I did a lot of Excel projects, and it was really tough to, first of all, manage versions of Excel, which is the final project that should really be turned in at the end of a class. It gets challenging, and there are businesses like SAP and others where they have multi-billion-dollar, multinational businesses managing systems of record. And when you think about the move from an Excel to a Google Sheets, instead of having to have a central system, or a central database that is the system of record, with Google Sheets, people can see in real time the copy of the ledger transactions, right? So if you think about an Excel file, sharing it in Google Sheets, how many people here have used Google Sheets? Okay, not everybody. So with Google Sheets, it's a client on Google where you can work on an Excel-like file with multiple people at a time. Everybody can see it in real time. And if I update the file, well, we can all see in real time that it's been updated. But the problem with Google Sheets is this. With Google Sheets, you can erase the edit history. So let's say we're all working on a project with Google Sheets and we all understand who's been putting in which information, and we've got our final project ready to turn in to our professor. And then, I'm working on the project and I didn't actually do any work, but I don't want anyone to know that. So I go in and I delete the edit history, right? You can't stop me from deleting the edit history. And this is the key difference for blockchain technology. With blockchain technology, you can't just delete the edit history. The underlying network makes that very, very difficult. We'll explain this a bit more. So with blockchain, kind of like with Google Sheets, what you have is peer-to-peer distributed information. So if we were moving from a traditional system, in our traditional system, I at the front of the room would have all the copies of the transactions. When we move to the blockchain system, now every single one of you could be a node and could have your own copy, right? That's the peer-to-peer distributed information, and that's very powerful. But what's special about blockchain, what makes it different from just Google Sheets, where you can also have peer-to-peer distributed information, is this, right? So we've all got our copy, but what happens when there's a new transaction? How do we update each of our copies in the same way at the same time? And the ability to update the copies in the same way at the same time securely, that is the central computing innovation of blockchain technology. And the technical way that the community describes it is consensus. How does your network achieve consensus so that when new transactions happen, they're updated across each of the copies in the same way at the same time? This is the key question. And here, I'm giving you a bit of a black box answer, and I'm going to unpack this. The answer is, in a blockchain-based system, you have cryptography, and you use cryptography to update your network in the same way at the same time across the nodes. Now, why do I say cryptography here and not go into this further? One is, remember our email example. You can all send emails without necessarily understanding the underlying math of how the email gets from one place to another, right? But the other is the cryptography that's used to update a blockchain-based system in the same way at the same time across the nodes is actually evolving extremely rapidly today. So how many people have heard that Bitcoin uses a lot of energy? And that Bitcoin is very slow, right? The reason that Bitcoin uses a lot of energy, the reason that Bitcoin is very slow is because the way that the Bitcoin network updates across the nodes in the same way at the same time is the first and oldest way. It's called proof of work and requires mining, for those of you who've heard of Bitcoin miners. This is not a talk about Bitcoin, so we're not going to dive deeply into that. But I do want to share that right now, there are live projects out there that don't use proof of work. They use updated mechanisms for consensus that are much faster and much less energy intensive. And for the examples I'm about to share with you, some really exciting examples of how this technology is being used in business already, all around the world. And those businesses are, for the most part, using private versions of blockchains that update. They have cryptography that is used to update the network in the same way at the same time, but they don't do it like Bitcoin, and it's not energy intensive, right? And it's very fast. And so I share that with you because the ways that the cryptography that we use today, already we can see in academic work on the horizon, even more advanced cryptography. And so what's important here to remember is, again, we're able to update the network in the same way at the same time across nodes securely, right? And the exact detail of how the network gets updated, that's kind of like knowing the exact details of how your email gets from one place to another in the world. And so what happens is when we have cryptography update the network at the same time in the same way across nodes, then each node will add a new block of transactions to the blockchain. That's why it's called a blockchain. You've got these chains of blocks. So imagine your Excel file Each transaction could be its own block. And each block is cryptographically connected. And so what that means is that if you do want to go ahead and cheat the network and make a change that no one can see, right? You don't want anyone to know that you made that change. You want to delete the edit history. This is what you have to do. You have to make the change on over 50% of the nodes at the same time and in the same way. Because if you don't make it on over 50%, the network will recognize a timestamp change. And guess what? You haven't succeeded in making an undetected change. But you don't only have to make the change on over 50% of the nodes at the same time in the same way. You have to make that change. You have to make changes on every single block in the whole history of the blockchain. Because the blocks are connected, and so if you make a change, even if it's on over 50% of the nodes, the system will register that a change has been made. And remember, when you delete the edit history, when you go in and you cheat the system, you want to go in and do it in an undetected way so that there isn't an audit trail that makes it possible to find out who changed what when. And so that's how you start to get this new level of security. Because each node is running a very high level of cryptography. So if we go back and we think about our traditional system, remember, you've got one very secure system of record that's administered in the most secure way possible. But if someone manages to get through the walls of the castle and make a change on your system of record, well, what do? You're in a lot of trouble, and that's part of why we have hundreds of millions of dollars of fraud today connected to our internet life. And so looking for more secure ways of network computing is a key challenge for our times. And blockchain provides one possible solution. And so before diving into our examples, I'm going to share with you one other piece of the technology, this term smart contracts. It's been going around, people have heard of it a bit. I have good news for all the lawyers in the room. I too am a lawyer. Smart contracts are not going to put you out of business. And how many of you think you've used a smart contract before? I'm seeing very few hands, but I have good news because almost all of you actually have used smart contracts. So what a smart contract is it's a piece of computer code that executes when new information is given to that code without additional human intervention. So if you've ever gone ahead and signed up for automatic renewal of a subscription to Amazon or some other automatic renewal of a subscription or automatic bill payment at the end of the month, you've used a smart contract. But what's powerful about smart contracts is connecting them to this very secure database. And it lets us start to do entirely new things. So I'm going to share with you a very exciting early stage example of how blockchain technology combined with smart contracts, combined with AI and satellite imagery, transforms our ability to save the rainforest. So Gameforest is a new startup. It most recently won the Hack for Climate Change Challenge this year. And what Gameforest does is they've set up a platform where if you're a donor interested in saving the rainforest, you can submit money to the platform, and if you are a villager in the rainforest and you want to get paid for preserving trees instead of being paid for burning them down, you can register onto the platform as well. And what happens is, if the trees are still there, right, the trees that your village aims to protect are still there in 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, a year, different amounts of money will be unlocked. And how do we know if those trees are still there? Who goes and checks? Well, the platform plugs into satellite imagery. Right now, there are images of our Earth, highly detailed images of our Earth being taken every day, being analyzed using machine learning and artificial intelligence. And so you can look at images of the rainforest from today, analyze them and see, is that forest still there? And if it is, then the funds can automatically be unlocked using a smart contract, a safe, secure smart contract, and there's no need for extra lawyers, there's no need for people to go survey the rainforest and verify. So it's a whole new way of being able to support indigenous people for keeping forests alive. And this gives you something of it starts to give you a sense of the way these technologies can converge to make new kinds of projects possible. so with blockchain technology, what we have is really a revolution in how we share and store information. Italy is a place with such rich history. Going back to pre-Roman times, and even before that, there have been so many different people in charge in various ways in Italy. And have any of you heard this term that the victors are the ones who get to write history? So one of the things that's fascinating about that is that think about oral history, right? Some of the great traditions of Western literature, the Odyssey, the Iliad, and beyond were originally, even the Aeneid were originally spoken. And then they were written down. And once something's written down, you can much more securely save it and share it for future generations. But even when it's written down, there's still so much of an opportunity to change things, to change the historical record. And with blockchain technology, it now becomes much, much more difficult to change the record. We still need dispute resolution, we still need mechanisms for updating, and we still have the problem that we need to be very careful about how information gets logged into the blockchain. We have to be careful that there are ways to update it if we find out that it was wrong. It's still a very human process. But the difference here is that we'll see the advances. We'll see the way the audit trail changes at each point. And we can have metadata logged in of why we're changing it this way rather than others, as opposed to a system we have now where auditors are left with much less rich information upon which to base determinations. And so ultimately, with blockchain technology, it's not just math. It really is this revolution in how we relate to one another. And that's part of why it's a lot like our ordinary internet. When the internet was first developed in the 70s, and when email first started in the 70s, no one thought it would ever be used, and it took decades for it to fully become the rich and meaningful way that we interact with each other today. And with blockchain technology, it's going to take time, but less time, because of how fast our world is changing exponentially, as you've been learning about in these past 2 days. And so now I'm going to take the time to share with you some examples of how this technology is being used today. I'm going to share with you where this technology is going and why it has the Googles, Facebooks, Airbnbs of the world pretty scared. And then we'll close. So Maersk is one of the largest companies in the world, it's public, largest companies in the world involved in international shipping today. And what's interesting about Maersk is that despite being the entity with the actual materials, they had very thin margins with their international shipping. It's a thin margin business, there's competitors, and when you look at the chain of who is making the best margins in international shipping, a lot of the best margins were going to small regional shipping companies that would help to take care of the administrative and documentation costs associated with international shipping. And so Maersk and IBM started on a project together. Last July they did their pilot. When they launched the pilot, they said, hey, we think that this system could ultimately save Maersk alone $38 billion a year when it's fully rolled out, because of how much it has the potential to reduce the costs of administration and documentation. And so it started out, the pilot was moving avocados from Mombasa in Kenya to Rotterdam in the Netherlands. And the challenge with international shipping, especially with perishable goods, is you've got to actually get customs to clear your container on time. And you've got to be very careful that no fraud enters the mix. Because if it seems like custom agents along the way have all said, well, this crate right here has avocados, but instead it has some suspicious white powder, that's a problem. And so the challenge for Maersk, for regional shippers around the world, was that as much as they could update documentation systems inside their companies, when it comes to international communications, when it comes to communicating between companies, they haven't been able to digitize that. And part of that is because bringing things into the digital world where you have to share information across servers and from one organization to another is still deeply insecure. And if you lose your audit trail, you're in trouble, right? So think about if we have paper along the way and they get stamped by the right customs officials. If we find white powder at the end of the day, we can go back and see, well, who signed off on this? And we can start to unpack where crime happened and start to limit that. But with blockchain technology, because of the way that it allows us to preserve information in a secure way, the way it lets us give a unique signature to a digital object, with blockchain technology, we can now digitize information that has before never been digitized. And the folks at Maersk have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on this program. They've had to work with stakeholders throughout the world, and they're not doing it by accident. It's because they really need something that's more secure and better for sharing and storing information, and this is a potential solution. And what Maersk and IBM have done is they've actually started a joint venture called TradeLens, which is logging over 1 million events in international shipping a day. It has over 90 partners, and they're starting to face competitors throughout the international supply chain industry who are trying to get on the blockchain boat. So this is an example of a place where there's very active investigation into using this technology, but it's done not by startups, but by large multinational corporations that have the resources to engage with government stakeholders and stakeholders throughout industry. One other example, Propi is a startup that's starting to bring various aspects of real estate transactions onto the blockchain. Everything from escrow to title insurance to land registry. Macinus is a company that's starting to use blockchain to tokenize ownership of art. So if you want to go ahead and buy a piece of fine art, invest in it, it can be quite expensive. You can also try to invest in a fine art fund. Those are limited in number, the minimums are very high. If you as a relatively ordinary person, an accredited investor, want to invest in art, you can now do that with the crowd using this technology. Everledger is an example of a company that's using this technology to track provenance for diamonds, to help to avoid the use of conflict diamonds, to support insurers in this industry. This is a multi-billion-dollar problem. Actually, the government of Australia is using blockchain technology to help combat fake made-in-Australia goods. This is a policeman who's standing on top of several tons of fake medicine. Fake medicines are an enormous problem around the world, and a consortium of some of the largest pharmaceutical companies today have come together, including Pfizer, Genentech. They've come together to build a blockchain-based project to start to track pharmaceuticals in the supply chain, to get around this problem, to start to stem it. Because imagine going into a store thinking you're buying medicine, and it turns out to be a fake, and it doesn't have the active ingredient that you and your loved one need, right? It's a tremendous problem around the world today, and we're looking for solutions. Blockchain is not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve it by itself, but it's potentially a key part of the new infrastructure we need to develop as a globe to stem the rising tide of fraud and crime. So the other thing that's pretty incredible about blockchain technology is that in Silicon Valley, there's a very famous venture capitalist, Mark Andreessen, and he famously has said, software is eating the world. If you're not a software company, be very afraid, because you have to be a software company in order to really face the competition that's coming to you, whatever industry you're in. And now, leading thinkers in blockchain technology are saying, look, we're in a situation where actually software is eating software. Because Amazon's margins, and Airbnb's margins, and Uber's margins, what happens to those margins when people can start to connect with one another directly, using platforms that take advantage of decentralized technology and also artificial intelligence. And so this is something that, for example, Sergey Brin, about 2 months ago at a blockchain conference, said that he's concerned that Google is falling behind in this technology, and they're pushing forward their efforts in researching this technology. Facebook has actually recently famously announced that they have a new group that's devoted to exploring blockchain-based payments and other blockchain-based offerings on Facebook. And so this is actually a cutting-edge area of research for some of the most famous technology companies in our world today. And so with that, I'd love for each of you to really think about how you might apply this technology. Because it's brand new, and the best ideas for this technology are going to come from you, from people who understand industry, understand problems, and can meet with the right technology partners to create innovative solutions to those problems. And so with that, thank you all for taking the time to listen to me. That went really fast. Thank you. I included my email for those of you who'd like to reach out with questions, so you're welcome. Thank you. Okay.